I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. Today, we've got Kip Adams. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with Kip. He works over at the Quality Deer Management Association. He's been on the podcast many times before, and most of those have been for this State of the Whitetail Union podcast that we have each year. Kip will tell you more about this in a second, but a very high-level overview of what we're going to do here is review a document, a report that Kip helps develop every year, which highlights the top stories and issues and data across the deer hunting world each year. So looking at harvest data, looking at big trends, looking at various issues that are of importance at this time for deer and deer hunting. That's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about. So we're covering, deer harvest numbers, age structure, other trends in deer population and deer hunting, changes in weapons use and how that's impacting populations, changes in hunter numbers and recruitment, a little bit on the latest with diseases like EHD and CWD and other major legislative proposals that are important for us hunters to know about. All that kind of stuff that we as deer hunters need to stay on top of, Kip is going to help us cover. So I don't want to beat around the bush too much today. Don't have Dan. We'll catch up with Dan next week. So today will be kind of a quick one. So we'll get right into it. I just want to give you a couple quick reminders on some other things you can be checking out if it's, it's that winter time frame, cabin fever setting in. If you're like me, you're dreaming of wanting to be outside doing some of these different things. So let me recommend two things for you. Number one, if you still haven't watched the Back 40 series, highly recommend you do that. That is the TV show, essentially, that I was the host of last year, documenting the story of us buying and learning and starting the process of trying to improve this property in Michigan and then hunting it. Check it on out. So over on the MeatEater YouTube channel, there's 8 episodes, and I'm very proud of how they turned out. And the new season is starting to be filmed here very shortly, so make sure you're all caught up. Number 2, if you're craving some big public land adventure, if you're craving a Western hunting trip or a float trip or climbing a mountain or hunting elk or hunting caribou, if any of those things are in your mind these days when you lay in bed at night, a book you might really enjoy is That Wild Country. It's my new book I published just a couple months ago. If you haven't picked up a copy yet, it would mean the world if you could. So far, reviews have been great. People are really enjoying it, which is amazing to hear. So glad and fortunate and thankful that people are liking what I put out there. So pick up a copy of That Wild Country. Buy one for a cousin, an uncle, an aunt, a buddy, anyone who you think needs to know more about the outside, the wilderness pursuits, the story of our public land. Grab them a copy. Get them learned up. I certainly would appreciate that too. So there's your homework. Check out That Wild Country and the Back 40 series. All right, back with me on the show is Kip Adams. Thank you, Kip, for being here again.
Absolutely, Mark. My pleasure.
Always enjoy getting to catch up, and especially our annual check-in for this reason, I particularly enjoy because what we're going to talk about today is the QDMA Whitetail Report, which you guys put together every year. And it does a really great job, for me at least, of kind of resetting my mind not just on like how my personal hunting is going, that I do myself, but this kind of gives me this big picture idea of what's the state of whitetail hunting and whitetail deer across the country. And I love the fact that you guys do this. So thanks for doing so much work. I'm sure it's no easy task.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm a data guy and certainly a deer junkie, so it's nice to kind of have the first look at all of this deer info from across the whitetails range.
Yeah. So for people that haven't heard one of these in the past or are not familiar with the Whitetail Report, can you just give us the quick cliff notes of what this thing is that you guys put together?
Sure. We've been doing this now since 2009, so more than a decade of annual reports. And what we realized was, we had all this access to information and with our state and provincial wildlife agencies, and hunters were craving this info. So we started doing an annual survey where we contacted every state and provincial wildlife agency's deer project leader and asked them a series of questions on, the prior season's buck harvest and doe harvest, age structure of those harvests, other hunting related things, like how many deer were shot with a firearm versus a bow versus a muzzleloader, and then ask questions on just the biggest current topics going on, during that given year, whether it was disease related or, crossbow related or whatever the case was. And then we compile it all together and put it in this annual report. And folks can look at it, on a state by state basis to kind of see how your state compares to others. Number of bucks that you kill per square mile and does per square mile, and all kinds of fun ways to just kind of gauge what's going on in the deer harvest world, as well as other big issues impacting hunters. So if you're a deer person, it's a one-stop shop for kind of the State of the Union address with regard to whitetail hunting.
Yeah. Is there any other organization or governmental entity that is looking at this stuff at a national level? Because every state is doing this individually, but I've never heard of anyone who's looking at the big picture other than you guys.
Well, yeah, I don't know of anybody that's put together, or compiled as much info nationally as we have. And the thing that's pretty cool about it is, in the early years when we contacted the state agencies, some of them were a little reluctant to give us some information. And, but once we convinced them, hey, we are trying, to help share this information, and it's good for the agencies as well, because they can see what's going on in their neighboring states and in other regions. And over the years, we have received tremendous accolades from hunters, for sure, from the media, but also from the state and provincial agency folks saying, hey, this is extremely helpful, for us too. So that's the goal of it, is to share good information and help. So it's always nice to hear folks, in all of those different disciplines, say, hey, we use this, and thanks for compiling it.
Oh, yeah. Given the fact that this is kind of unique, what you guys are doing compared to probably what any state has there been any, I don't know, major epiphany or any kind of management change or anything that's come about because of the data you guys have put together, like the big picture story? Has that given a light bulb to any organization or state that's led to some kind of change?
We hear a handful of stories each year where an agency will thank us for a certain chapter that's in there. For example, a perfect example in this year's report, one of the chapters is on starting time for firearm season. When the vast majority of the states, hunters get to start a half hour before sunrise. That's listed as the official start time.
Yep.
Well, there's one state, New York, and actually New York is the only state in the country that makes their hunters wait until sunrise. And so they don't get to, that first half hour. Well,
Jeez.
About 5 or 6 years ago, or actually maybe a little more than that now, Ohio's hunters used to be in the same boat. And by collecting some information from surrounding states and putting together a little plan saying, hey, you guys are one of the only ones that make your hunters wait until sunrise. Ohio DNR was actually able to change their regulations, so they now start at half hour before sunrise, in large part because you could compare it to other states. So New York's kind of in that same boat right now where their hunters and their agency, and I know their agency would like to, or at least some in their agency, would like to change that as well. So, it's a nice educational tool for that, because they can look and say, look, every other state in the country, allows their hunters to start a half hour before sunrise. There's not safety issues with that. So anyway, we have seen examples like that where, because the data is together and it's both a regional and a national look, that's enabled state agencies to change some of the ways that they manage deer, that's a little more uniform with the rest of the country. So that's pretty cool. We're glad that we can help with that.
Yeah, I bet Matt Ross was pretty excited to spearhead that project and get that change made.
Absolutely. So Matt is definitely in favor of getting an extra half hour.
Yeah, for sure. I can't imagine not being able to hunt that first half hour of daylight. That's tough.
I know. What's funny about that too is that South Carolina is the only state that goes more than that, and their hunters are allowed to start an hour before sunrise.
Whoa!
So I thought
that's a little far.
That was my sentiments exactly. And sometimes we get data like that and think, oh, geez, did we input this data wrong, or did the agency guy tell us wrong? So we confirmed, with the South Carolina DNR, and they said, no, that's right. That's when we start. So. But
like
I
dark.
thought the same thing. Like, wow, that is, there's lots of times, with a, real bright night, or if you have snow on the ground, you can definitely see, maybe a little before, a half hour before sunrise. But I'm thinking, an hour is pushing
That's
a little
pushing
bit.
It. Yeah, half hour before sunrise always seemed like just right. It's like that natural breaking point where colors start to pop a little more. Okay, yeah, all right, it's daylight, it's time. But an hour could be pitch black almost.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's interesting. So let's talk about this year, the 2020 report, and this examines 2018 season data. Correct? That you're reviewing that comes out in 19.
That is correct. Yep. So the most recent hunting season, where the data is all in and compiled and able to be shared, is with through the 2018 and into 19 hunting season. Okay. And because actually right now, there's still a few hunting seasons, that are just finishing up. Actually, Alabama's still going. So some people say, well, geez, if it's the 20 report, why are you using 18 data? Well, it's because, the 19 hunting season technically is not done yet everywhere, and that data is not available. So it's the most recent season that's all done, and data is shared with the country.
Okay. So what's the high level grade? Like if you were the professor and your class was the United States deer hunting season and you were going to rate that season on a F through A scale, in some kind of somewhat objective way, how would you rate this season?
Well, I'll break that into two, and I'll actually give it two grades. I'll give it one for the buck harvest side of it, and I'll give you one for the antlerless harvest side. And for the buck harvest side, hunters definitely would rate it as an A. It was one of the highest buck harvests of all time, and that's saying a lot because historically our country was very, very good at shooting bucks, and we are at historically high numbers again. The total buck harvest was over 2.9 million antler deer, and that does not count buck fawns. Buck fawns go into the antlerless side. So deer that are 1.5 and older, it was over 2.9 million. That actually was down just a hair from the year before, but we're still way above national averages. So from the buck side, definitely an A, lots of bucks. And we'll touch on age structure here in a minute, but unbelievable age structure. So lots of bucks. Arguably the best age structure ever. So we get an A for that. From the antlerless side, a little lower grade for that. But we can talk a little more about the buck harvest first before we get into the antlerless side if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. So let's expand on the age structure thing then. Looks like the trend that has been going for a decade or a decade and a half or so now continues, right?
That is correct. Yep. And we have been monitoring the age structure of the buck harvest since 1989. So a long time. Yeah. And last year, it was literally the best age structure in our country's history. And I say that the best by we monitor the percentage of all the bucks shot that were 1.5 years old, those that were 2.5 years old, and then those that were 3.5 and older. So kind of group all of those older ones together. And last year, only 30%, so less than a third of all the bucks shot were 1.5 years old. And that is by far the lowest percentage in U.S. history.
Wow. Now, this is when you average out across all the states, though, right? There's some states that are much higher than that. There's some states that are much lower, correct?
That is correct. Yep. Yeah. So the average, to give you a feel, in 1989, when we started monitoring this, over 60% of all the bucks shot were just 1.5 years old. So that statistic has been more than cut in half today. So, and some people look at that and say, well, why is this a good thing? Well, essentially what that means is, if we are protecting the majority of yearling bucks each year, that allows the majority to, at least hit 2.5 years of age. And we can go ahead and start shooting them then. That's fine. But the good thing is we won't get them all. So some will become 3.5, some will become 4.5 and 5.5, et cetera. And once we have that balanced age structure on the buck side, that's very natural for deer populations. It's very healthy for them. That's how they evolved. That's how their social order works best. So as managers, we should be interested in making sure we do match that natural age structure. And with what we're shooting today, it allows that to happen. So that's a really good place to be.
Yeah, can you expand on what you're just saying there as far as the benefits of that balanced age structure? Because you get this a lot where people say, well, you talk about this management, but it's really just because you want big antler deer. Not as many people understand the benefits from a health perspective and a habitat perspective and all that. Can you just give us a little primer on that too, just for people that maybe aren't familiar?
Sure. Deer are very social. Far more social than most people realize. And they evolved under this very complex social order where they are always sharing information at rubs and at scrapes. They're leaving information there through pheromones where, younger deer pick up on these cues. And there's a whole social order that works based on having this complete age structure of deer that are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old and older. And all of that starts to fall apart if you don't have those older animals there. Now, some people will say, well, all of the does out there will be bred even if you only have young deer. And that is true. Even if all the bucks are only 1.5 years old, sure, they can handle the breeding requirements for that deer herd, but that's a pretty poor measure of herd health. So a much better measure is, hey, let's make sure that we're managing for a deer herd that is natural. And if you look today, Mark, in unhunted populations of deer, like in urban areas or other places where you just can't hunt, they have very advanced age structures. If you look in Native American trash piles where they can pull out jawbones and, before white man had a big impact, they had very advanced age structures. So, that's just a natural thing. And so as wildlife managers, we should strive to, produce what would naturally happen anyway. And that happens when we have very balanced age structures of deer. That lets the social orders work. That keeps those younger bucks from spending so much energy in the fall and winter trying to breed. It allows them to have more body fat going into winter. So survival is higher. They're healthier in the spring at green up. So there's a whole bunch of pieces that play into that. But at the end of the day, it's very clear that balanced age structures for whitetail deer are certainly good for hunters because we have the opportunity to pursue older bucks. That is true. However, they're also very important for the deer herd themselves.
Is this the biggest change that you guys have seen since starting the Whitetail Report? I mean, if you were to look at over this from the first report to now, or from when you were tracking things first, and you look at all this data that you've been studying year after year after year, is this the most substantial difference, or is there anything else that stands out like, hey, this is a lot different than it used to be as well?
There's two really big differences. This is definitely one of them where, age structure has changed. So, only 30% now are one, and 37% of the buck harvest last year was at least 3 years old. So they were 3 or 4 or 5. That is by far the highest percentage of those older bucks. So literally that's a monumental change in what's gone on. So there's also one other huge change that we can address next. But this age structure difference is definitely one of the two biggest things that has changed since we began writing this back in 2009.
So then what's the next one?
The next one is actually the sex ratio of the harvest. I told you that we shot over 2.9 million bucks last year, and it's record high buck harvest numbers. The flip side of that is the antlerless side. So while I would give hunters an A for the buck side, we are a lot closer to a C, grade C, for the antlerless side. And the reason for that is for the second year in a row, we shot more bucks than we did antlerless deer. The first time in U.S. history that we shot more antlerless deer than we did bucks was back in 1999. And that was a historic year managing deer because for most of the whitetails range, we need to be shooting more does than bucks each year to have healthy populations. There are certainly some places in the country, New England comes to mind, Florida comes to mind, where we can be successful by shooting more bucks than does each year. But for the vast majority of the country, that is not the case. So, well, in your home state of Michigan, think of it this way, in the UP, you can be successful, by shooting about the same number of bucks as does. In the UP, that keeps deer herds in check, it keeps things balanced. But in the southern, peninsula, you can't be successful. You have to shoot more antlerless deer.
Yeah.
Well, we have been doing that for a long time. And that's really one of the reasons, the foundation of QDMA is, hey, let's balance deer herds of habitat. We do that by protecting some of those young bucks and focusing effort on does. So 99 was a landmark year. And then for a couple of decades after that, we continued to shoot way more antlerless deer than bucks. Well, 2 years ago, that changed. It was the first year since, in the late 90s that we actually shot more bucks than does. And it was just a few thousand. That was it. Well, last year, the gap got wider. We again shot a lot more bucks than antlerless deer. And we shot almost 50,000 more bucks across the U.S. So that's not good. The antlerless harvest has dropped about 20% in the last decade. In some places that's needed. We've had places where we've balanced deer herds and places where we've lost a lot of deer to disease. But in much of the country, that is not the case. So we are absolutely going the wrong way with the antlerless side, and that showed again last year. So
what do you think
I'd
that
give
is?
us a grade of C.
Yeah, what do you think? What's behind that? Is that because hunters don't think the deer populations are where they should be, so it's a choice to try to reestablish populations that hunters don't think are large enough? Or is this, I don't know, what's the theory behind it? Do you have one?
I think there's a couple things. One is there are still a faction of hunters who just simply don't want to shoot antlerless deer. It tends to be a lot older hunters. Younger and newer hunters tend to be much more likely to shoot antlerless deer, to put that meat in their freezer, to do their part for conservation and be good stewards of the natural resources. So you still have some people who just choose to not shoot antlerless deer. And part of it is we have some pretty liberal buck bag limits in a lot of the country. So people would just rather, shoot something with antlers than not. And I get that. But one of the dangers of that is we've actually looked, this data came from last year's Whitetail report. What we found is across the country, less than half of all the hunters in the U.S. will shoot a deer in any given year. It's only 41%. So 4 out of 10 hunters kill a deer. Only 15% of hunters kill more than one deer. So it's a small number of people who shoot multiple deer a year. So, you, me, and our friends, we're the anomaly.
Yeah.
The ones that are killed. I can't imagine that, the Adams family eats a lot more than 2 deer a year. But because of that, since such a small number shoots more than one deer, a lot of states allow people to, kill at least 2 bucks. So with that, if the average person's only shooting one, they prefer to shoot a buck. And if that small number that gets to shoot more than one, they often, if they have a chance, they will take a second buck too. So we're focusing too much effort, even though our buck age structure is really, really good. These historically high buck harvest rates is because, if people take that second deer, and it's a small number that do, but for those that do, many of them take another buck, and we're just simply not putting enough effort on the antlerless side.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Yeah. Okay. So I know this is well-trod ground, but again, let's assume there's new hunters listening. Why is it important that we try to take out some of these antlerless deer and manage them a little bit better? Why is this so important? What happens when we don't do that?
Well, the way that we control deer populations is through the antlerless harvest. We can shoot all the bucks we want, but that's not controlling population growth. In most cases, we have to shoot the antlerless side. So, and we want to keep deer herds healthy. We do that when we have balanced sex ratios. Now, if you take all the fawns born in Michigan this year, or my home state of Pennsylvania, or anywhere else, about half of them are buck fawns and about half are doe fawns. So just from that, you have to shoot about the same numbers of bucks as does each year just to keep that sex ratio balance, keep that deer herd healthy, and have any chance of keeping deer from becoming too overabundant. So that's the very quick and dry and short answer to say, hey, it is so important. And I'll tell you, now with the spread of CWD, it's becoming more and more clear that in these disease zones, it is even more important to focus additional harvest effort on these does, or we're just absolutely losing the disease game.
Yeah, I want to talk about that specifically in a minute. But one more clarifying question on the overabundance thing. Again, just to get folks up to speed here, what happens to a deer herd and an area when you have way too many deer? Because there's a whole cascade of effects when your deer population is out of whack with the habitat. Can you just walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Deer eat a lot, and the average deer eats about 2,000 pounds of food a year. So smaller deer eat less than that, bigger deer eat more, but on average, they're eating a ton apiece. So, that's a lot of food that we have to provide. And as soon as we have more deer than we have adequate food available, what they start doing is then the deer herd starts degrading that habitat, and then they're being nutritionally deprived, so they're not as healthy as they were. And then what that means is as they start degrading the habitat, then other wildlife species are negatively impacted. The habitat is negatively impacted. And then since they are degrading next year, that area can't hold as many deer as it could this year. So it can support fewer deer next year, and then fewer the year after that. And, from a hunting end, that's absolutely the wrong way we want to go. And just from being a good steward, that's wrong. So we want to make sure that there's not more deer than we have good food for, because that negatively impacts all the wildlife species and all that habitat that's there, headed in the wrong direction. So and the cool thing is, though, as soon as we balance that deer herd and shoot enough antlerless deer, the deer that are left are healthier. They have more fawns. The habitat is healthier, which means it's better for turkeys and songbirds and non-game species. It's a win-win when we pull the trigger on enough antlerless deer.
Yeah, and then from a hunting perspective too, wouldn't you agree that having that better balanced antlerless side will lead to a more intense rut, which is going to give you a more fun hunting experience too?
Absolutely. And that puts more bucks on their feet more during daylight hours during the fall, which is exactly what we want. You've never heard a hunter say, man, when I go hunting today, I hope the bucks are just not moving. We don't want, but if you have way more antlerless deer than bucks, that's often what happens, because they don't have to move very far to find a doe.
Yeah.
So balanced age structures make deer move more, and they make them move more during daylight hours, which is good for us as hunters.
Yeah. So that's what's going on from a buck and doe harvest. We talked about age structure. Any other big things that stood out to you this year as far as headlines for the 2020 report? Yeah,
because of this whole antlerless thing where we're not shooting as many deer, we asked all the states a question. Hey, what is your preference for the antlerless harvest in your state? Do you want to see them shoot more antlerless deer than bucks, or about the same number, or more bucks than does? We wanted to see what the philosophy of the agencies were. And it was extremely regional. What we found is the vast majority of the Northeast, they want the antlerless harvest to be more than the buck harvest. Hey, we know we need to kill more antlerless deer. The exception to that was New England. And New England, they want to shoot more bucks than does, simply because they can't sustain the same type of harvest that you can or we can here.
Just the habitat type, right?
That's right. Yep. And then the severe winters, and fawn recruitment is lower, so those deer herds aren't as productive as places where it's a little easier to live. But so most of the Northeast wants to shoot more antlerless deer than bucks. The Southeast was different, and most of that says, you know what? As long as the buck harvest is about equal to our antlerless harvest, we're pretty good. That's what we'd like to see. So that's very different from what we have in the Northeast. And then the Midwest was kind of in between the two. Some of the states wanted more does, some didn't. And you guys, actually, the Lower Peninsula, they said, absolutely, we need to shoot more antlerless deer than bucks. Yeah. The UP was about the same, same number of each. And this is very helpful, because there's a lot of hunters that hear what I talk about, or you or others, and but where they're from really matters. So, for example, if you're from Florida, area that's just not real productive soils, not real productive deer herds, you just can't sustain anywhere near the same levels of antlerless harvest as a Michigan or Pennsylvania or Iowa or those. So it's very helpful for hunters to see, hey, what's my agency's philosophy on this? Because then it allows them, to help more during the deer season, either shoot an extra antlerless deer or 2 extra antlerless deer, or wherever the case is. So it can allow them to be a better partner and more engaged on what's going on.
One of the things, this is a little bit of a segue, but it brings to mind another one of the topics you guys covered in the report. And one of the things that hunters have been worried about for many years has been the introduction of crossbows. And the theory being that if we introduce crossbow seasons, that's going to get way too many deer being killed by these crossbows that are too easy for people to use, and that's going to result in the crash of deer populations or some other issues. You guys took a look a little bit at crossbows this year in the report. Is there any truth to that kind of impact that crossbows could have, or what have you guys seen as far as that introduction over the last, decade or 15 years, or however long it's been that crossbows have been more and more popularly utilized?
That's a great question, and that is a growing concern by many. One of the things that we looked at in this report is we take a look at the total deer harvest, and we ask the agencies, hey, what percentages was taken by a bow or a muzzleloader or a firearm? And the bow and crossbow together. And what we saw, we've been monitoring this for a long time, and 15 to 20 years ago, only about 15% of the total harvest was taken by bows. Now this was kind of before most of the crossbow seasons were put into effect. Fast forward to now, and over about the last 5 years, this number has stabilized, but over the last 5 years, bows and crossbows take about a quarter of the deer harvest. So that climbed a lot when you were seeing a lot more crossbow seasons, but it's kind of stabilized right there. And year in and year out, it's about 23%. So that is not changing over the last few years. So firearms still take about 2/3 of all the deer. However, what is changing is the percentage of that archery harvest that's taken by crossbows. And we took a look at, hey, which states allow the vast majority of hunters to use crossbows during their archery season. You don't have to be a senior or a youth hunter or have a disability or whatever. Today, in the vast majority of the country, or at least the vast majority of the eastern 2/3 of the country where most whitetails live, almost everybody can use a crossbow during archery season. So that's really grown, which then begs the question, okay, what impact are those crossbows having? And what we see is they're really not changing the overall deer harvest. No state has changed their crossbow laws because crossbows are killing too much. Nobody has made those efforts yet. However, the one big change we're seeing right now is there are a handful of states where now the crossbow harvest exceeds the vertical bow harvest. Places like your state of Michigan, mine in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, Wisconsin, some of these really big, and long-term deer hunting states. Now people are really taking advantage of crossbows. So it's changing the actual archery harvest. Archery harvest has stayed about the same. It's not getting higher, but more of those deer are now being taken by crossbow, and that's drawing attention from a lot of hunters, particularly a lot of traditional bow hunters.
So it's not impacting deer herd levels. It's not impacting the any kind of it's not impacting the herd. It's simply impacting how hunters are engaging with the herd. So how people are doing it. So really, it comes down to people that would otherwise be killing deer with a vertical bow are switching to a horizontal bow, a crossbow, and just utilizing this easier option. Or do we think that that crossbows are doing one of the things that people hypothesized, which is that they are allowing new hunters to come into the game in a more easy fashion, or keeping long-term bow hunters in the game longer as they get older? Do we have any data or anecdotal evidence that one of those two things happening?
We do, and it's a little bit of all of those things that you just said. There's no doubt that they are bringing or allowing young hunters to partake in the archery season at an earlier age than they would. My kids are perfect examples. My kids my son this year when he was 10, and my daughter when she was, I think 9 was her first year, 9 or 10, we're archery hunting with me. They both shoot a vertical bow in the backyard with me and love it. But, neither one of them pull, or at that time anyway, anywhere near enough weight, to hunt with that bow. However, so we'd stay in the backyard and shoot our compound bows, but then we'd go hunting. We got a crossbow, so, they could start hunting then. And we are seeing that, in many states. So the one thing that's a little funny with us, though, is that no states are being able to show, this big increase in hunter numbers because that's directly resulting from being able to use crossbows. But there's no doubt that there's a lot of young hunters today hunting with a crossbow that just simply couldn't with a compound. There's no doubt there's a lot of aging hunters that are able to continue to hunt in the archery season because they can use crossbows. And it's undeniable that there's a lot of new adult hunters trying hunting because they can use a crossbow first. And our field to fork programs are a perfect example, where we find adult hunters who want to do that. Many of them are, particularly many of the ladies that get involved, are very intimidated by shooting a shotgun or a rifle, and just want nothing to do with that at first. However, they think, the crossbow, I can do that. I want to get my own food, and I'll try it with a crossbow.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some evidence that those are helping, at least some, with recruiting hunters and retaining some hunters.
So there's seemingly no big picture negative impact from them. There's seemingly some possible positive impact. It comes down to a purity issue for some hunters. What do either you or the Quality Deer Management Association say to those who have concerns still? What's the stance of the organization or you personally?
Yeah, well, I am a diehard bow hunter. I am very serious about taking my compound to the woods, and so I get it when there's other diehard hunters that just really despise crossbows, and I know a lot of people that do. However, I try to look at the big picture and say, even though I don't choose to hunt with a crossbow, man, I'm glad that my kids can come hunting with it. And, I have an older member of our deer camp, is in his 80s now, that bow hunted his whole life, that just simply can't anymore, but he still crossbow hunts. So, man, I'm glad that he can come. And, so my take on it is, hey, we need hunters more than ever before. So if crossbows are not having any negative biological impact on deer herds, but they can help get more people into the woods, man, I'm totally fine sharing the archery woods, with somebody else using a crossbow. I get it in some states where their buck harvest is, a lot. Crossbows are taking a lot more of those bucks and taking them earlier in the year, than some of the firearm hunters can get to. But man, everybody can get a crossbow and go hunting. So I can see both sides. But man, I'm totally fine sharing the woods with somebody using a crossbow. God bless them for wanting to hunt and to be out there.
Yeah, I'd rather have somebody getting into it and learning to love this stuff and this resource, and maybe someday standing up for it. I'd rather have that person out there doing that than never getting into it at all because they didn't feel comfortable with a compound or a gun. So,
That's right. Nope, I agree.
I'm with you. So speaking of that hunter recruitment challenge, which crossbows we hope is our one small way to help address that. I didn't see this addressed in the report, but from your perspective or from any of the other things that you've been involved in or looking at, where do we stand on that front? I mean, there's a big article that came out in the Washington Post recently talking about declining hunter numbers and the impacts that's having on conservation funding. It's a thing that we continue to talk about year after year after year. Just what's your sense of, or what's the pulse on that? Where are we doing anything right? Are we still trending in the wrong direction? Do you feel like we're making any impact with the programs we're trying, or all the talk about it?
Well, I do, and it's undeniable that we're losing hunters, and then we're losing them at an alarming rate. Of all the different recruitment programs and retention programs that are out there, we have not had a lot of success with those. I think mostly because the majority of them were focused on youth, and about 5 years ago, we being QDMA, took a little different look and said, hey, we still do a lot of youth stuff, but hey, what if we did something that focused on some more adults who may want to go hunting? And that's kind of what our Field to Fork program was born out of. And I share that to say that has been the one success story that we have seen in the opportunity to kind of turn the tide on loss of hunter numbers. For example, a lot of youth programs, the actual impact is pretty minimal, because first of all, a kid can't take himself hunting. They need somebody to take him. They can't buy a bow or a gun. And so if they didn't have opportunity to go, then sure, let's take them and show them a good time and expose them to it. But, that's not a big recruitment factor that way. However, with an adult, hey, they can get a bow, they can drive, they can buy a license. And so what we have seen with our Field to Fork programs is about 80% of all the people that go through those continue to hunt the next year. Wow. They buy a license, they buy bows, they buy guns, they buy camo clothing. So we, I think, are on the verge of having something to really change that tide. We've spent the last few years kind of developing a model that we know will work with regard to mentoring hunters. So we're in the process right now of scaling that up and being able to use it at a much broader scale, where it doesn't just have to be QDMA staff and volunteers that can implement these programs, and get these people involved, but we can have others who aren't even affiliated with us follow these methods that we have shown to work very well, that then we can do this in communities across the United States. So is it going to work? Man, I sure hope so. And I think we have a better model than anything that we've had, in the last several decades to do this. So it's just a matter of we're able to pull it off at a scale that really makes a difference. But there's no doubt, Mark, that the future is brighter, at least for this model, than anything else that we have seen in a long time.
Yeah, I am excited about that too. I do believe you guys have found something. You've tapped into something that really does have some potential. So excited to hopefully continue helping on that front and make that a reality and make that scaling possible.
Yeah, and you have been involved in those. So, I mean, you see the power of them. You have mentored hunters, and that's as much as anything is that historically hunters look at this as, hey, I'm going to be a consumer. I'm going to hopefully shoot something and eat it. I'm going to use these opportunities. Well, we need to change that dialogue some to, we need to understand that every hunter has to, you know what, I am going to do all this. However, it is my responsibility to then also teach somebody else. And I know you do that and you're very good at it. And we need to impress upon the mass of hunters, hey, this is why it's important. And once we convince you it's important, okay, here are the materials or the way to make it easy for you to then go ahead and do this.
Yeah. I've just always thought that we all get so much from hunting, so many benefits, so many ways that it enriches our lives. I think if you enjoy those benefits, it then becomes incumbent upon you to give back, to try to pass it on, to try to give back to the resource or to help other people enjoy that resource. So it just seems like an obligation, like not even a question. It's just something you absolutely should have to do. So I hopefully more and more people feel the same way.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something. because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
I want to switch gears a little bit, Kip, from what is a little bit of a glimmer of hope on the front of this new program that's helping with some hunter recruitment. I want to skip to something that's a little less positive, which is the whole topic of disease across the country. I know this is another area of continuous change and evolution, as you guys have been doing the Whitetail Report. EHD and CWD have both come up various times, either annually or here and there, as we've talked over the years, doing these annual check-in podcasts. Where do things stand right now with EHD and CWD? What's our status report, and what do you foresee moving forward?
Well, from the EHD end, we're continuing to see more frequent outbreaks. And if folks aren't familiar, EHD it's hemorrhagic disease. It's a viral disease. That's one of the most natural diseases of deer. It's carried by the no-see-ums, so these little biting midges. That's the disease that's carried during the summer. We often see deer end up, near water. It's very common with deer. What we're seeing is an expansion of the severity of those outbreaks. It used to be just kind of a disease of deer in the southeastern U.S. And, those deer were exposed to it every year. They can develop antibodies against it. So you didn't see these big die-offs. Well, what we're seeing now is, it's not a disease of the Southeast anymore at all. It's all the way up into Canada. It's all the way across the country, through Montana. So a lot more deer herds being exposed. We are seeing more severe die-offs on a more regular basis. So definitely bigger impacts than in the past. Now, the good thing is, if some deer survive, and that doesn't kill everybody. And even some that get it survive, and then they are more resistant to it in the future. So the overall impact, we lose a bunch of deer in some areas, but they recover very quickly. There's no long-term effects, and then you just kind of go on with it. That's very different from CWD, where it's 100% fatal to all deer. They don't recover from it. And once it's there, the bad thing about CWD is it takes a while to infect enough deer in a deer herd to start seeing population level declines. So unlike hemorrhagic disease, where people find, oh God, deer got it now, they're dead a week later, I can see that, I understand this is bad. CWD doesn't work that way. It's kind of like the slow killer. So many hunters just don't realize the severity of it. But big picture, CWD is way worse for deer herds in the future of hunting than hemorrhagic disease. It's like scales worse.
So what's the latest update on CWD then? I know that we continue to hear new reports trickle out week after week after week, year after year after year. What are the headlines on CWD this year?
Well, it continues to expand. It's now in 26 states, so it's in over half of the U.S., several foreign countries as well. But we see continued expansion of it, new states as well as areas within states that already had it. There's been a lot of doom and gloom over CWD in the past because we had so few success stories. But you know what? Even though it is continuing to spread, for the first time, we are starting to have some research help us out with some positive things. For example, this past year, for the first time ever now, we know, hey, we can finally decontaminate or clean knives, saws, and other things that we process deer with. So we know how to get rid of the prions off the stainless steel. And it's pretty cool. It's as simple as a bleach bath, basically. Can't decontaminate a carcass or the environment yet, but at least we have a step in how to beat this on our equipment that we use, knives and stuff, to field dress and cut up deer. So that's a good thing. We know for the first time, possibly through some soil properties, it's humic acid properties, where, hey, we know something in the environment that now may help us in this fight against CWD. So they're small steps, but man, it's nice to have something positive for the first time in this fight, because as this continues to spread and impact more deer herds and more hunters, we need some good news, and every little advantage that we have gets us a little bit closer to being able to do something to stop this disease.
Yeah, could you expand on the soil topic, what that research has shown? Is that something you feel comfortable expounding on?
Sure. There's been some research, and we know once CWD is in an area, in the environment, the prions stay in the ground and can affect other deer. So, for example, if a deer has CWD positive and it urinates or defecates in the ground, other deer come in contact with that, and then they can contract the disease. This is why when you get it, the disease, they outlaw baiting, they outlaw feeding, they outlaw mineral licks, because they don't want deer swapping, spit or eating where another deer urinated or defecated, because they can contract the disease. Well, we also know that wherever that prions are on the ground, there are certain plants growing there that can actually uptake those prions up through the plant and have them in their leaves. So if another animal comes and eats those leaves, there is a chance that deer can contract the disease from that. So, man, this is in the environment. We can't decontaminate the environment. This is a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now researchers have seen with this humic acid or some of these different soil properties, hey, you know what? Maybe now there's something that just is a natural ward to these prions. So they don't understand exactly how to use that to our benefits yet, but it's way different than everything else we have seen in the environment, where certain soils, like clay soils especially, tend to bind these prions more tightly and can potentially infect deer at a higher rate in those type of soils. Well, now with humic acid, there's something about these soils that make them make deer way less susceptible to this disease. So even though they don't understand the entire connection yet, we have identified something that may help us in this battle against CWD. So there's a lot of pieces that still have to be put together, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Because there's nothing that we know of until very recently that we could decontaminate any area where the disease was. So
yeah.
The more we understand about how to do that, then the better job we can do at limiting spread of these prions and trying to get rid of them once they are there. So every little bit helps for sure. Even if we don't have all the pieces put together yet, at least that is a very positive step.
Yeah. So you don't think that sending fire trucks full of bleach to spray all over the county isn't a really good solution?
Not yet. And it's funny because when they came out with the research about using bleach to clean the knives, they have big letters to make it very clear. Hey, this does not work on tissue. Don't put up, because the first time somebody reads that, they say, hey, well, if it cleans my knife, what if I just soak this backstrap?
God,
in this bleach?
Yeah.
So no, it does not, doesn't get into tissue at all. It's only on stainless steel. So if your deer is not made of stainless steel, don't try to clean that with the bleach.
Yeah, and I hope you're not shooting any stainless steel deer.
That's right.
Speaking of trying to battle CWD, though, you did allude earlier to this whole topic of antlerless harvest and the importance of focusing on does when it comes to managing CWD. There's a lot of talk about the importance of buck harvest when trying to contain CWD, because bucks tend to disperse more. But I know you wrote an article and you've been trying to make sure people understand that you can't forget about does. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So much of the fight against CWD focuses on killing bucks. And the reason for that is because bucks carry the disease at a higher rate than does. And there's some great data from multiple states that show that. Adult bucks are about twice as likely to have it as adult does. Yearling bucks are more likely to have it than yearling does. So a lot of the effort has been at, hey, man, don't let these bucks get older. We got to kill them, before they take this disease, and infect everybody. Well, in doing that, a lot of the educational campaigns by agencies and even a lot of deer managers get so focused on the buck side that I think that, they're going to lose the war. And what I mean by that is there's 4 big reasons, and this is what I wrote about, to not forget about the does. One is that some great research out of Wisconsin showed that just because of the social order of deer, bucks tend to be a lot more loners, where does, they just live in these family groups. So if a doe had a relative nearby that was CWD positive, that doe was 10 times more likely to have the disease. So what that means is these family groups, as soon as one of them gets the disease, everybody else in that group is much more likely to get it. Once they get it, they then become these reservoirs of the disease in the environment that we can't decontaminate. We can't get rid of it. So we need to absolutely minimize the opportunity for this happening. And that happens by shooting antlerless deer and keeping deer herds in balance with the habitat. So that's one. The second thing is, part of the reason that some agencies focus effort on young bucks or say, hey, we need to take off these antler restrictions to kill these yearling bucks, it's because these yearling bucks disperse. And there's lots of research that shows that when bucks are 12 to 18 months old, half to 3/4 of them are going to disperse from where they were born and set up their own home range. And they tend to do this 1 to 5 miles away. So what some have said is, holy cow, if they're going to go, they might take the disease with them and introduce it into a new area. Let's kill them. And there's certainly some warrant to that when they disperse, they can move the disease. But by focusing all that effort on those young bucks, we end up then killing fewer antlerless deer. Well, some very brand new research out of Minnesota and southeast Minnesota specifically is following young bucks and young does. And what they're finding is their young bucks are dispersing at about exactly the same rate as all the other studies show. But their does are dispersing at about the exact same rate. So while half to 3/4 of the young bucks are leaving, half to 3/4 of the young does are too. They're dispersing, and they're dispersing almost as far. So there's a opportunity for them to spread this disease too. So we can't focus too much of the effort just on those young bucks. We need to be focusing it on the does as well, or our efforts are lost. Third thing is, and I think this is one of the biggest things, Mark, I fully have seen the data and understand that adult bucks are about twice as likely to have the disease as adult does. However, what people forget about is take any place in the country, or just about any place in the country, certainly any place outside of South Texas, any given deer herd has way more than 2 adult does for every adult buck. So take where you are. Okay, maybe you're doing a good job managing and you got 1 or 2 5-year-old bucks on the property. I will promise you have more than 2 or 4 or 5-year-old does.
Oh, yeah.
So what happens is, even though those bucks are twice as likely to have the disease, every deer herd that we see has more than twice as many adult does as adult bucks. So even though they are less likely to have the disease, just by sheer numbers of those does on the landscape, there will always be more CWD positive does than CWD positive bucks out there.
Yeah.
So if we are going to manage this disease, we have got to be killing those does. And you and I talked about it earlier, where less than half of the hunters kill a deer, only 15% kill more than 1 deer. Take Michigan. You can kill 2 bucks in Michigan. So what happens is so many of these people end up shooting a buck or shoot 2 bucks, and then they don't shoot those does. They're not sharing that meat with others. So we are absolutely going the wrong way. And that's why I've told people, hey, if you focus all of your effort on young bucks or on bucks in general, hey, that's the wrong way to do it. You can win this buck battle, but you're going to lose the disease war. You absolutely are. So do we need to shoot bucks? We certainly do. But we need to be focusing even more effort on the antlerless side. And this is especially true once you're in a CWD zone.
Yeah, great point. Has there been any, I think, if I remember right, Minnesota was kind of updated their plan for CWD recently. Is there anything new or innovative or useful that we've learned over the last year as far as management strategies? Because this is always the controversial thing. Hunters are always up in arms about how a state decides to manage CWD once it arrives. Is there anything new on that front or that's being tried? I think last year we talked about this a little bit, and you were encouraged with one state. I honestly can't remember which it was now, but I don't know, anything new on that front, or are we just kind of doing the same old, same old?
Well, the folks are definitely looking at some new things, and partly because they're starting to understand, this need to get more effort on the doe side. Pennsylvania is actually probably the best example right now because they are going through an update of their CWD plan, and they have taken the stance, which I think is exactly right. They have gone out to the hunters in their disease zones and have admitted right up front, hey, we can't do this without you. We need your help. We want you to be the saviors in all of this and help us battle this disease. And we want you to do this by shooting, X number of antlerless deer. We need to increase the antlerless side. So here's the deal. We know that we can come in with targeted removal after the season with sharpshooters, and shoot these extra deer. You don't want us to do this. We don't want to have to do that. We would much rather work with you during the hunting season and have you shoot more antlerless deer than you have in the past. You're still going to have very huntable populations of deer when we're done. We're not asking you to go to zero with the deer herd, but we do need you to shoot more deer. Here's why, and they're doing a great job educationally sharing this information. And if you can hit these harvest rates that we need, kind of similar to some of the stuff that's going on in Michigan in that disease research area, if you can hit these harvest totals of antlerless deer, then there will be no targeted removal postseason. If you don't hit them, then we're going to be forced to come in and do this. But please, we want to do this with you first. So my take on it is it is the first time that an agency like that has really reached out and truly tried to be a good partner with the hunters and let them know right up front. You guys are the ones, guys and gals, that will make or break this program. We need you. We know we can't do it without you. Yeah. And just that reaching, and trying to develop that relationship, man, that goes a long way to getting support from not all of the landowners and hunters, by sure, but from a lot of them. So I think that is the ticket to solving this issue moving forward. Stronger relationships, because hunters are absolutely needed. And if they understand how they can help, they are more likely to help. So education is the key to that. Big, strong educational campaigns. So anyway, I think that's a pretty exciting thing, and I'm excited to see where it goes here.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of other important ways that hunters can partner with whether it be managing agencies or legislators that are in some ways impacting the population or the resource. I know there's a number of different things that you do, and the conservation side of QDMA works on as far as policies, as far as pushing various proposals or supporting various things that are ongoing in different states. I'm curious what some of the major things is the wrong word. I'm blanking on the right word here. But some of the various proposals or pieces of legislation or anything ongoing across the country that you think that hunters need to know about and put our support behind. I know there's this Pittman-Robertson Modernization Act that's out there. I'm curious if that's something we should be paying more attention to. I know there's been a proposal put out there to protect the boundary waters, which I know you guys have lent your support to, which I think is awesome. Are those things that we should be talking more about? Is there anything else on your radar that we need to kind of rally around? What do we need to know about?
Well, what you just mentioned, both of those are great and good for all sportsmen and women. The one big thing right now that we really could use support for that is going to benefit all hunters is there's a fair number of federal bills out there right now that are looking at increasing federal funding for CWD research and management. And back when, the early 2000s, there was close to $20 million in federal dollars that the state agencies got to manage CWD, to sample and all that. Well, all that money is gone. It was as soon as they figured out the CWD likely couldn't impact humans, all that money dried up. So all of the sampling that's done today and surveillance and monitoring, the vast majority that's coming right out of the state agency budgets. And man, wouldn't it be better if our states could use that for things like hunter access and habitat enhancement? And so we are pushing hard with some of these federal legislators to get this federal funding, which would allow agencies to then use more of their own budgets on cool things like habitat enhancement and that. So that is the one thing that the hunters can get behind. It was a great push last year, and we thought we were going to get about $15 million in federal funding for the states. It didn't end up happening. That will be reintroduced again this year. And that probably, I would say probably arguably is the single most important bill like that hunters can get behind to really make a difference with what we have both now to hunt deer and in the future.
Okay, well, when that gets reintroduced, I will definitely be rallying the troops to get behind that again. I know that research money and just knowledge, we're just lacking so much information still, and it seems like the only way to get that is to get money behind it, get the research going, and cross our fingers and toes.
That's right. Outside of legislation, the best thing that hunters can do, though, is take somebody else hunting. Expose somebody new, take them, introduce them to the sport. That's cheap, that's easy. We all can do that. So I challenge everybody this year to get somebody and expose them, at least once to the woods and, hopefully multiple times. So
that is a great place to leave us off here today. Lots of great information, Kip. I appreciate you sharing it with us today and taking all the time to put together the report. For people that want to see this whole thing, the whole report, and there's a lot more that we didn't cover. Where can they find that?
They can go right to QDMA.com. We have all of our whitetail reports on the website as free downloads, so they can go and grab it and have a blast searching through and seeing how their state compares to others. Very
good stuff. Kip, thank you for your time.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you. Awesome job with the back 40 and everything you do for conservation. And man, I can't wait to read your book.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And that is going to do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate you listening. Lots of cool stuff coming up. We're kind of retooling, figuring out what the plan is going to be for 2020. New ideas, new projects, new hunts, new stories, new guests. Lots of cool stuff on the way. So stick around. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. After 3 years of work, our follow-up to the Meat Eater Fish and Game Cookbook is here. It's the Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, campfire, and camp stove. Here is your book for everything that's best cooked or eaten outside. From grilling to open fire cooking to Dutch ovens to smokers to barbecue to backpacking meals to how to pull off the perfect fish fry, with pit stops along the way for lessons about Ice Age cooking methods and the best 5 ways to construct a cooking fire you can be proud of. And of course, we're focusing on wild game and fish here with over 100 recipes, including stuffed venison burgers 3 ways, wild duck with ahi verde sauce, a jerky made with cola, a gin and tonic made with fire-charred lemons, and grilled frog legs made with a sticky sweet sauce. This ain't your normal cookbook, so be prepared to be surprised. Get your copy now. For more info, visit themeateater.com or buy it wherever books are sold.